Okay, so who out here has two different size feet? Okay, yeah. Well, like 30% of the population, by the way, have two different size feet. And there's no clinical name for this disorder, so I made up my own. I call it being a misfoot or a misfeet or even a misfit. Now, I'm also a complete fitness fanatic. And so the combination of these two things can be problematic because when buying exercise shoes, I have to pick, am I going to cater to my big foot or my little foot? So this one time, completely screwed up, I decide to cater to the big foot. And I go to this hipster sneaker store in Hollywood that doesn't accept returns. And I walk out with my sneakers and I go to my hip hop dance class and I'm gonna kill it, with a pop and lock. But instead of popping or locking, I am tripping in shoes that are basically clown size on me. So I happened to be going that night to Skid Row to feed the homeless. And I thought, why don't I bring my overpriced, too big sneakers to Skid Row and I can give them to someone who could probably use them a lot more than I could. So down I go to Skid Row feeling like I'm this really awesome person, and I immediately spot the ideal sneaker recipient, which is to say, a guy who looked like he could use a new pair of anything. So I hand him the sneakers and I'm ready for his gratitude, and instead he looks at me, he looks at the sneakers, he looks back at me and he's like, do you have another color? So I go home really discouraged about humanity. Here I am trying to give back and this man who could clearly use my gift is sniffing at it. But the more I thought about it, the more I wondered, why did I feel like I needed to be labeled some good person for what I'd done? And that got me thinking about labels. See, we've all worn a lot of labels in our lives. We're all wearing labels on our clothes. I have worn the label of woman, of writer, of, a few years ago, young, now older. You guys, I don't know the labels you've worn or wear. College student, young, sexual abuse victim. And some of our labels are kind of silly. I have worn the label, don't tell anyone, cat lady. It's true. One of my books is about my relationship with my cats, my best-selling book. And on the Internet Movie Database, where it lists people's TV and film credits, it has this trivia section, and it's always really good trivia. It'll be like, climbed Machu Picchu twice, or distant relative of Charlie Chaplin. On mine, trivia, 3 words, has a cat. That's all it says. But the most important label I've worn is a little less benign than cat lady. See, the most important label I've worn is addict. And I embrace that label wholeheartedly. Now, everybody has a different definition of addict, so I'm going to give you mine. It's someone who is so uncomfortable with how they feel that they're willing to do anything they can to change it, even if changing it may mean dying. Now, you may wonder why I would embrace a label that everybody knows is bad, and I get it. Before I embraced the label of addict, I was horrified when people labeled me as one, and they did. An addict, I thought, was the person clutching the empty bottle in the gutter or with the needle in their arm. It wasn't the girl from the nice family who graduated from a good college in 4 years, but just happened to spend her 20s holed up by herself doing cocaine. Of course, because I was holed up by myself doing cocaine, I knew there was something really wrong with me. I figured I had to be not fit for this world or just some kind of a freak. And I realized once the pain of how I was living got to be actually greater than the pain of changing, that there was something wrong with me. I was an addict. I still am. I'm just one who hasn't had a drink or a drug in over 17 years. But back to Skid Row. When I think about the experience now, I realize I was so consumed with my own disappointment over this man's failure to receive my gift the way I wanted him to, that I failed to see my own prejudice. I saw a man with an invisible label around his neck that said homeless. He just saw a pair of shoes he didn't like. To me, he was someone who should be so grateful to someone like me for caring. To him, he was a man with his own hopes and dreams, his own aspirations, his own taste in sneakers, a man who had probably fallen on hard times. And he surely saw me not with like the label of good person or whatever I wanted him to, but with a label of his own, like condescending rich lady. I have no idea. But the problem as I see it isn't that we label people. It's that we do it in this really closed-minded way. If we could use a label as a jumping off point and not a conclusion, I believe it could be one of our greatest tools for open-mindedness. Consider this. When students are labeled smart or motivated, like all the students here, I'm sure, studies show it changes the rest of their lives. But that's not the only good that labels do. Labels, they give us a tribe. We live in a very fractured society, and we are all looking for a tribe. So it doesn't matter what that label is, it gives us the solidarity of a group of like-minded individuals, whether that's Lakers fans or Dodgers fans or Deadheads or Burners, it doesn't matter. Now, the interesting thing about labels is that our perceptions of them change. If you don't believe me, consider the fact that when I was growing up, the worst label you could have was nerd. The worst. Cut to today, there are gods who walk among us. Am I right? I live in Hollywood. I could care less if people see celebrities. A friend of mine sent me a selfie of him with Mark Zuckerberg. I almost lost my mind. And it's Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and these people we worship. And nerd isn't the only label that's changed. Think about ADD, attention deficit disorder. Not that long ago, if you had ADD, you were screwed up. Now, people like Richard Branson and Ted Turner are talking about having it. And then there's dyslexia. Now, when I was growing up, if you were dyslexic, I'm sorry, you were stupid. That's what we thought. Now, if I'm going to continue to subscribe to that definition of that label, I'm going to have to reconcile that with the fact that Steven Spielberg and John Irving are among the people struggling with it. And how do I know that? Because they talk about it publicly, in turn giving other people who may be struggling in shame with that label, permission to do the same. Now, I noticed something when I embraced the label of addict. And that's that sober addicts and alcoholics were some of the smartest, funniest, coolest, most motivated, most successful people I'd ever met in my life. Now, until I embraced that label, I didn't see myself as smart or motivated or successful or any of these things. But as soon as I started to notice those commonalities among all the sober addicts and alcoholics I was meeting, I thought, maybe that's me too. I realized that it was no wonder that these entertainers I had loved, whether it was Eminem or Russell Brand or Robert Downey Jr. or Stephen King, were all sober addicts. It was no wonder I realized that the people who made me want to be a writer, people like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Tennessee Williams, had struggled with alcoholism. Now, on my road to embracing my labels, I suffered a lot of what we in recovery call pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, which culminated, it's a lot of big words that really just means over 17 years ago, I was driving, drunk, high, and just thinking, I should just end this. I should just swerve into oncoming traffic. Now, I could regale you with more tales of seedy adventures and misdeeds, but honestly, they're not that interesting. What's interesting is that I wear the label addict squarely on my chest, in turn giving other people permission to do the same. Now, when a lot of people out there see the word addict, they don't see this positive thing. They see what I used to see. They see the person clutching the empty bottle or with the needle in their arm, or maybe they see the guy I gave my shoes to. And so they argue that the label addict is bad. The Associated Press last summer released a statement saying journalists shouldn't even use the word anymore, that instead they should say person with addiction. Now, I radically disagree with that. In fact, I think it's that attitude and not the word that's the problem. If we could use a label as a jumping off point and not a conclusion, it can be one of our greatest tools for open-mindedness. Now, we all have labels we're ashamed of. And that means we can all be part of a revolution. Yes, I am not being dramatic. Simply by embracing the labels you are most ashamed of, you can be a revolutionary. It's true. As Leonard Cohen sang, there's a crack in everything, because that's where the light comes in. So if you don't know where to start, how about the label, what I am, what you are, what the guy I gave my shoes to is? Human. Or what about the one I started off with? Misfit. I don't know anyone that hasn't for just at least a split second felt like one of those. So that is my message to you, fellow misfits. Go out there, embrace your labels, share them with the people in your lives. If you're comfortable, share them with the world. Be a revolutionary. Let the light in and change people's perceptions. Thank you.